Hi, I'm Chef Todd Clark, a culinary instructor here at Sask Polytech, and today I'm going to help you make your Thanksgiving hopefully a little bit more memorable, and we're going to be talking about turkey. The first thing you want to do is obviously go out and select your turkey, and there's a few different types you can purchase depending on where you're buying. Obviously you've got your fresh and frozen. That's the one we've got here today. This one was previously frozen, and you want to give it at least 5 days in the fridge to thaw out. This one still has a little bit of ice inside the cavity, and it's been about 5 days. The other ones we've got you can select are organic. If organic are important, select the one that is raised according to the organic standards here that we have in Canada. And the other one is also known as a heritage bird, and that is a specific type of breed. It's a little bit leggier, a little bit leaner. It also has a little bit more flavor. It's also going to be a little bit more costly. Once you've figured out what type of bird you're going to select, then you're going to need to know, obviously, how big a bird or turkey to purchase. And that's depending on how many people you want to feed. Figure on about 1 to 1.5 pounds of turkey per person. Okay? And so first of all, to figure that out, tally up your turkey guests, how many people are going to be coming over for the dinner that evening. Add a few extra pounds for the bones inside the animal, of course. And then you've got the weights. For example, if you've got 8 people, you're going to need about a 12 to 14 pound bird to feed them all before it's cooked. Okay? If you've got a really, really big crowd and you've got a smaller oven, perhaps maybe roast 2 smaller turkeys instead of 1 really large one. They're going to cook in a shorter period of time. And if you really want, you can experiment. You can do 2 sort of different preparations, one on this turkey, one on that turkey, giving some different flavors. So once you've selected the bird and the size that you've got, then you're going to need a roasting pan. Find yourself a good, fairly heavy gauge metal roasting pan with a little bit of sides on it. You're going to need some sides because we're going to have, liquid will be in there and some of the vegetables because you want to save all that dripping so you get the gravy. The next most important thing before you get going, make sure that the oven rack on your oven is put in the right position. You want to make sure whatever you're roasting or baking is in the center of the oven because it's surrounded by the hot air, and that way it's equal on either side. So you may have to move that oven rack to the very bottom of the oven depending on the size of your turkey. Another thing too, some ovens, and you'll know your oven obviously better than anyone, it's going to have some hot spots. If it does have a hot spot, typically some ovens, they're hotter at the back of the oven. So when putting the bird in the oven, when it's ready to roast, put it so that the legs will be at the back of the oven. These are always going to take longer to cook than the breast meat. When we talk about roasting, as well, like I said, in the middle of the oven for the bird. Same with your roasting pan and vegetables. And that's what we've got here today. We've got basically sort of what we call the holy trinity of vegetables in the kitchen, or the workhorse vegetables. You got your onions, your carrots, and the celery. We're getting into parsnip season. And of course, herbs are always a lovely thing with the bird when we're roasting. And so what we want to do is we just want to take some of these vegetables and cut them up very roughly, and allow the turkey to sit on top of them, and that allows the air as we're roasting to go all the way around the bird, and then it allows for an evener roasting, and it also allows for a crispier skin. And of course, this is where we're going to catch all our flavor and drippings to make our gravy. So of course it's going to develop some flavor in depth into that as well. And so simply, just like I say, rough chop, and you just want to place these vegetables in here just roughly as you can. Again, don't slice them too small. If they are very, very small, what will end up happening is by the time your turkey's cooked, these will be burnt. If you find that they start to get too dark as you're roasting along, add a little bit of water to the pan so as to not burn. So simply like that. Now this is the bed for our turkey, and I'm going to leave that there, and now I'm going to show you how to prepare the turkey before we set it on top. So as you can notice, here I've already taken the innards out. Here they've left this flap of skin, and that's going to allow us to hold the legs back together. So don't cut this. You want that there, okay? They've done that for us. As you can see, the cavity is empty. I've taken out the liver, the hearts, and the neck. And all these things we want to keep. And again, we're going to put that in the bottom of our roasting pan with those cut up vegetables. And we're going to let that roast with the bird on top. And that's going to obviously give our gravy a lot of flavor. So go ahead and just put that in there now. You don't want to waste any part if we don't have to, of course. Now, simply to make it a little bit simpler, if you are going to carve the bird, especially table side, for more presentation, you want to take back the skin flat, and I'm going to remove the wishbone. And what that does is the wishbone is running right here, okay? And with it out, you take the knife, rather than following this angle, it'll go more straight down. So simply, I'm going to put the knife on the outside of the wishbone and push down and go all the way down it on this side, all the way up to the middle. Now I'll do the same on this side. I can just simply feel it right there. Again, in, pushing against the bone. That's the inside. And then again up, careful, up to there. Now I can see the wishbone. Now you have to take a little bit of muscle. Try not to break it, but you're going to just try to pull the whole thing out. Obviously, every animal, every piece of poultry has one of these, very similar to this. The larger they are, the more difficult it is. So if you have to cut away a bit, try to obviously leave as much meat as you can. You can see it's about released. You can see my fingers are behind it. Give it a good tug. Up at the top. There we go. And you can see it'll come right out. Don't worry, that's not my blood, that's the turkey's. Oh, and if it won't, simply give it a snip. There we go. So, I broke it, but you can see that's the wishbone right there. If you don't break it, throw it in the oven, roast it whole, give it to your grandchildren, kids to play with, they can pull on it, pull it apart. And again, that's out of the way, so now when you go to carve, you won't have to worry about missing any of that lovely breast meat that we have. Now, a couple things before we go. Stuffing. We don't recommend stuffing the bird whole. We recommend putting the stuffing on the side and doing that separately. There's a couple of reasons why. The stuffing is going to take longer for it to cook inside, therefore taking the bird longer to cook in the oven and potentially drying it out. Nobody likes a dry turkey. It's one of the hardest things when everybody cooks turkey, to keep it nice and moist. So cooking the stuffing on separately, you're going to control the cooking of the turkey better. And it's also sometimes it can be dangerous because the inside can't reach a high enough temperature sometimes. So that's why. But the one thing you definitely want to do with the cavity is you want to season it. I know you think, well, geez, I'm not eating that. But salt, you can get some pepper in there. And good pinch. Don't be afraid. A whole lemon, throw one in there. If you're feeling it, put an orange. That's going to give it a nice little citrus. I've got a couple onions here left over. I'm going to put them in there. We don't have any fresh herbs today. I've got some dried. I've got a little bay leaf. If you're going to use some of the whole seeds that I've got here, I would use some ground nutmeg. This is whole. I've got some allspice, juniper, and clove. I would use ground. Simply that way you're not going to hurt anybody's teeth, obviously. We're not going to put that in today. And again, fresh herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, marjoram, anything like that. Again, we're going to keep that flap like I said. So we're going to simply just either put the flap of skin back over the legs. Now, if that broke for some reason, that's not a problem. You can simply, almost did break on me. You can simply just get a piece of string and tie them. Professionally, we call that trussing a bird. And the reason why we do that is simply to keep it very compact and sort of cook evenly at the same rate. Now, this flap of skin you've got in the front, tuck that underneath. And now simply, if it can be a bit tricky, you want to get that wing bone underneath. Okay, keeping that flap of skin down. You try not to rip the skin. And again on this side. There we go. And again, this is for even cooking, just to make it nice. The bird wants to cook a little bit more evenly at that rate. Now, It is ready to go onto the roasting pan, but before I get there, I just want to talk about one other option, because there's so many options that you can do when it comes to roasting. So you could brine your turkey beforehand, 1 to 3 days. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it with a dry brine or dry cure. That's usually just salt, sugar, and seasonings. Rub that on the outside and the inside and let it sit for 1 to 2 days in the fridge. Or you can make what we call a brine, so liquid, salt, sugar, and seasonings. Cook that up, let that cool down, and then let the turkey sit in that for 1 to 3 days as well, obviously in a fridge. Now, it's a little bit difficult because of the size. Your fridge might be full of other things. You could use, say, a cooler large enough, empty the beer, put the turkey in there, and let it brine. Now, the next thing is make sure if you're using a wet brine that you dry it off really, really, really well. Because the more moisture we have on the skin and the excess of this turkey, and when we go to roast it, it's not going to roast, it's going to sort of steam, and that skin will get soggy, it won't get crispy and brown like we all really want. So if you're using it wet, a wet brine, make sure you dry it off really, really well. If you're not using any of those techniques, make sure that the bird is really, really dry. One good tip to use, let it sit overnight before you roast it in the fridge uncovered, and that'll take care of some of that excess moisture. Now that we've talked about that, I'm simply just going to put it on top of what we're going to roast it, and then it's ready to basically almost go into the oven. So once you've got your turkey in your roasting pan on top of your vegetables, another thing you want to let it do too, let it warm up. Take it out of the fridge, let it come up to room temperature. That's going to speed up the roasting time. It's cook a little bit quicker for you. Now, you want to season the outside. You can either use a little bit of oil, clarified butter. This is just whole softened butter. I'm simply just don't be shy, folks. Don't be shy. This is where the flavor's coming. You know, this is the guarantee that your turkey's not going to be dry. Is the way of putting it. Again, see, it's a little bit moist on the outside, so could take a couple. Once you get one coating on, we'll do this side here first. Once you get one coating on, you can do another one. You could do this. You could even do this a day in advance, and then bring it out of the fridge and let it warm up. And it won't melt off. Obviously, we know that butter won't. So you could also make a flavored butter if you wanted to. You could put a little truffle oil in here. You could put some herbs, garlic, anything like that. So again, you can see it's just falling off here, but that's just the temperature of the butter and the bird. If you really wanted to if you want to have a little bit more fun, and I didn't mention it before, you could go underneath the skin. Okay, so before undo the legs. Be very careful not to rip the skin, but you can slip your hand. Here, I'll just undo this for you guys. You can slip your hand underneath the skin and the breast meat. You can see there, and there is a membrane that you can. So if you wanted to do something like that, get a little bit more moisture and flavor, and don't be afraid, and get that butter right underneath the skin. You can do that underneath the legs as well. Okay? So again, it's a little bit of a messy job. You can get everybody involved in the family in there. If you got young kids, they might want to get their hands dirty, get them in there. Now, once you've done that whole side, simply, I'm going to take off one glove really quickly. Don't be afraid. Let's give it a good seasoning. Okay. I'll go ahead and finish the other side here when we come back from commercial break. Wait, we don't have commercials. Just kidding. Okay. So once we've got it there, we're almost ready to go into the oven again. Check that oven temperature. Make sure it's ready to go hot, and then we can go ahead and set that into the oven. So now that we've got our turkey all seasoned on the outside with the softened butter, salt and pepper, again, you could flavor that with anything you like. Back in history, about 200 years ago, they used to eat truffled turkeys in France. We did a little bit of the math here in the kitchen today. That would cost about $8,000 a turkey, or if you're feeding 10 people, that's $800 a person if you want to invite them over. So we're not doing that today. So maybe you want to go with a little truffle oil instead of that one. Another thing, so now we're ready to go into the oven. just like that. Like I said before, make sure, again, these legs will be back together. If your oven has a hot spot, put the legs at the back, or if the hot spot's at the front, put the legs in the front, or wherever that hot spot is. They will take longer to cook than the breast meat. Once it's in the oven, we want to talk about basting. We don't want to let the bird to dry out. So you can baste. Some people have mixed methods on this one. Be careful. This is not something like a small chicken that you're going to open the door, pull it out, and baste and baste and baste. So as you open this door, you're going to lose a lot of heat. You do want to baste. Some will say yes you do, some will say you don't. If you baste, do it quickly. Don't do it very often so you don't lose all that heat. Otherwise, your bird is just going to take that much longer to cook. If it's getting to a point where you've got it in the oven and you think, oh my God, the color is beautiful, I've got that golden brown I like, but you know it's still not cooked all the way, just simply tin foil it to protect that skin from getting a little bit more color. Okay? Once you know, how do you know if your turkey's cooked all the way through? First thing you need a thermometer. You need a thermometer. There's a couple kinds you can get. Just the probe kind, or now you can get the probe kind that's hooked up to the digital kind. Those are awesome. And it's key to know where to put the thermometer. You're going to stick it in the thigh. Okay? The thigh is going to take longer to cook. You want to be careful not to stick it and touch the bone. Okay? The bone is obviously running through the leg here, the thigh. So anywhere in here, or in here, or you can even come in between and perhaps in here. But the reason why you do not want to touch the bone when we're roasting animals with the bone tends to hold a lot more heat. So if the thermometer is touching the bone, it can give you the wrong reading and tell you that your turkey's cooked when in fact it's not fully cooked. Some people as well will take the legs off and take the bird out of the oven when the breast meat is cooked, and then put the legs back in to continue cooking that. That's always the difficult part when cooking a turkey, because of the parts take different cooking times, and to not dry out the breast meat. And that's the trick with that one. At 165 degrees Fahrenheit, when your temperature reads that on your thermometer, pull your turkey out of the oven. Then you want to tent it. What we call tenting. Just make a loose tent out of tin foil to cover the top so as to not lose some heat. And then you definitely want to let that bird rest. And by resting, you don't want to slice into it right away. You want to let all those juices flow back out into the animal, and then it'll be juicier, more flavorful, and it's not going to be sitting all over the cutting board when you go to slice it. The next thing, when you go to slice it, you've now taken all the time to select the bird, how many people are coming over, make all the fixings and sides, and roast this thing perfectly. Do not neglect the knife you are going to carve this turkey with. Maybe give it a quick sharpening. Make sure it's not super dull. You've done such a great job to get it perfect. Why not slice it perfectly? That's all I've really got on the tips and tricks on how to roast your turkey for Thanksgiving. If you didn't want to roast, some other options might be you could smoke. If you've got a smoker at home, some people are deep frying whole turkeys. If you are, be very, very careful. I recommend doing this outside and a very safe environment with a fire extinguisher, and you definitely want to make sure the thing is dry, and maybe Google that first before you go ahead and do that. That's another popular way. And again, just the classic way of roasting it. I hope some of these tips are helpful for you and your family. Happy Thanksgiving and bon appetit.